Hello and welcome to this week's Journey on the Road Less Traveled with Gary L. and Gigi's Boo here on RealLibertyMedia.com and RLM Radio and wherever else this whole thing goes on, either live or in the archived, I think, at YouTube and Ustream and wherever else.
That's it, just wherever.
Yeah, wherever else it goes, I post it. We've got a Steaming account now. And minds.com, that's another site you might want to look at. So anyway, say hi. There's Gigi's Boo. What's up, Gigi's Boo?
Not much of nothing, just sitting here we're working on our house, trying to get some things done. And Gary and I picking out furniture and different things. He's left most everything to me. I get his input. I don't do anything without getting his input. But still, that's about what I've been doing. And it's still a mess. We've been working on it, 3 weeks?
Yeah. It's get ready for the winter time when you spend more time indoors than out. So it's always kind of nice to do that, don't you think?
Oh, yes. Yes, do it when we're doing it and get it done and get it over with. And hopefully, I kept saying, the way we're going, we're not going to be done for Christmas, but I'm hoping that we will be through by Thanksgiving. I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, that'd be good. And Atticus got worst wrenched and haircut this week, didn't he?
Yeah, and I found out one thing about him. I think Gary told Hal. Hal likes to hear about his escapades. Atticus has a thing for blondes, and I couldn't believe it. When he ran off, the girl he was talking to was blonde. When I took him to get him clipped, he had a new groomer. She was blonde, very pretty girl. Oh, he just pranced, and he makes a U sometimes when he gets happy. He's waggling that nub. And I told Gary, I said, we got a problem. He likes blondes. And Gary laughed. But yeah, Atticus is washed, rinsed, and clean.
Yeah, so he's ready for winter. He's been winterized.
Yes.
Yeah. So hey, everybody in the chat room over here, you guys, if you're listening, they're not in RLM chat room. RealLibertyMedia.com. If you're not in the chat room, you're missing half the fun. Especially early on Sundays, and it's something I don't mention very often. I should. At 12 o'clock Eastern time, Grim Near starts playing some really good music, and it goes on till 3 o'clock. So you got 3 hours worth of a really great playlist that I don't know how he does it every week, and so it's like different every week.
He's a magic man.
Yeah, he's the magic man. And also, as a benefit for those in the chat room, there's a Trivial Pursuit game that goes on for approximately 3 hours worth, and folks can check in and might kind of learn things, but to have fun. It's kind of like at the retirement home, you have bingo night.
Yeah.
so people have fun playing Trivial Pursuit, and it's just a neat set of bots and programs and things that run within the chat rooms, the IRC chat, that you can either access as from a standalone platform or just go to the website, the homepage, and check in, say hello. Meet all these nice folks out here, and like Cowboy Tech, and Grimner's here. And of course, Grimner is the webmaster. He is the master blaster of all the things that go on here. And you have Moose Girl. That's his sidekick if you listen to Freakers Ball on Friday nights. If you're a late night person on Friday nights, check out Freakers Ball here on RealLibertyMedia.com. And you have Kate and Esmo and Bessie and Bitcoin Bob and Charleston and Chloe and Graham Z. She has Grammy's Rocket Chair. I think 2 days a week. Wednesday maybe and Friday. I'm not sure. Forgive me for not knowing exactly. But you can check it out. That's all these shows are well promoted on the website. Again, RealLibertyMedia.com. IB Don C is here. And my computer just popped a window over top of the chat room. Okay, there we go. And Java Doctor. Hey, Java. And JJ's here. And Wanataco, Meister Brow, Paul Bunyan, Rain, Arl, and Fluke is one of the bots that helps make this chat room run. Rob Works, Tip Bob, Trust No One. And Behind the Woodshed, of course, that's Hal and his show, Behind the Woodshed, every Sunday from 3 until 5 on Eastern Time. And that's, as I've said before, probably the best alternative radio show in existence. And if you haven't listened to it, you're really missing out. Then there's Dakota, Death Spawn, hoo-ha. Dima, Flash Nasty, Frumpy. There's Gigi's Boo, hey. And Jehovah and Kozu and Moe and Nenson Dubois and Pawn Sauce and Sock Puppet, hey, Slim Jim Flim and the Phantom. All these folks and more at reallibertymedia.com. So anyway, that was long enough promotion, do you think, Gigi's Boo?
It was a long hello.
Yeah, and not a laughing matter, of course. It's been we've been discussing, and it's been being discussed in the chat room. This is the most latest crazy event in Texas, and who knows what's going on with that? The thing that, of course, it's always tragic when anyone does something like that, and you have victims, and you have innocent victims in this case, apparently. I think a 2-year-old, Gigi's Boo mentioned. But what is most, well, it's not most, but also disturbing is how the trolls on social media immediately try to leverage an event like this by variously claiming the guy has Muslim connections or he's a Christian. They come across, they don't really come out and say it, but suggesting that he is a Bible studies teacher, which... He's
a Bible thumper, put it plain.
Yeah, right. A Christian radical, or which a lot of people call Christian identity, which is also extended to things like KKK and neo-Nazis and all that stuff. And it just immediately, the stuff comes out. Like, where do these people, what is wrong with these people? I don't
understand it. I really don't.
Well, and it all ties right back into this whole fake news business. Somehow or the other, you can't get a straight story. And, we just listened to the press conference. And of course, they're not telling you much because it's an investigation underway, and they're not going to give you a lot of detail, other than suggesting that he's a lone shooter who left the scene and was killed away from the church.
They're not sure if he committed suicide or if my mind just went blank. Not a spectator.
A citizen.
A citizen that was right there saw him shooting into the front of the church, and he went to the side and shot, and he was shooting, went into the church and shot, and as he came out, this citizen engaged in gunfire with him, and he dropped his gun, jumped in the car, and the citizen followed him. They're saying that this alleged shooter just went out, hit something, and went out across the field, and when they got there, he was dead. So they don't know. They're not telling you if it's suicide or if he was actually hit by the concerned citizen who responded with fire, and it was in a delayed reaction. Maybe he bled out or something, I don't know. But there was fire exchange between that citizen and the shooter, the active shooter, yeah. So they don't know what killed him.
Yeah, and yet again, another consistency in the story, as I was telling. Of course, we both get kind of amped up because the politicians have to have their say, and the sheriffs have to have their say, and they have to give all this.
Shut up. Gary gets tired of me because.
And all these have to give out all this credit and la 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 la.
I said, shut up.
Really? I don't want to
hear that. Give us
I don't want to hear that. Tell me what happened in 10 seconds or less.
That's it.
Drives me crazy. It's like I told Gigi's Boo, that you're not going to know what happened. But we still don't know what happened or did not happen in Las Vegas. And yet again, here we have another conveniently dead perpetrator, for what it's worth. But anyway,
one thing
go
we
ahead.
do know, when they opened up the Kennedy files, they did say there was a second shooter.
Yeah. That's we could do a whole show on that.
I just throw that in there. I'm sorry.
That's
Go
okay.
ahead,
Yeah, we could do a whole show on that, and as we get closer to the anniversary, we'll probably pick that up a little more. That's a whole nother. But actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because we now know probably as much about the Kennedy assassination as we do about what happened in Las Vegas, and which will probably be about as much as we know what happens here at this church, which isn't a whole lot. And so it just, but anyway, I just wanted to emphasize how all this disinformation, it's like these people are in place and they're prepared to just blast out a narrative, no matter how inaccurate it is and how ridiculous it is, but it's very consistent. And it's consistent with this whole fake news phenomenon. Anyhow, that's enough of that, Gigi's Boo. What do you think?
Yes. Carry on, darling. Carry on.
Let me just drop that, because I'm not going to share that on the blogcaster. How about a recall notice? We like to do those. I turn my feedback, or my talk back down a little bit. So how about 550,000 dishwashers are now being recalled due to a fire hazard? Now, this is something to listen to, because these weren't necessarily recent manufacturers. So it's something to really check out, because there's reportedly a manufacturing defect in a power cord that can be a fire risk. And to date, 5 house fires have been reported associated with that. Percentage-wise, it's pretty low, but when you're talking about fires and house fires, the percentages, any chance is probably more than you want to deal with. But they were manufactured within a large time frame between September 2012 and January 2015. So if you have purchased a dishwasher between now and 2012, we have serial numbers here that you can check to see if that particular item was included in the recall. And also bear in mind that if you've moved into a place, if you're renting or you've bought a new house or something like that, and it was built or remodeled in that time frame, you could also accidentally have one of these in your possession. And it shows you where to find the serial number and model number and all that good stuff. So it's a pretty good article. Some of the brands that are covered are Bosch, Thermador, Jagano, Genair, Kenmore. So Sears, right? So how many people shopped at Sears before prior to their demise, I guess. But anyway, here you go. And if I can bring the chat room back up again, I'll drop that in for you. So anyway, you might want to take a look at that. If you feel like it's possible you could be included in that group, you might want to take a look at that list and check the serial numbers. Make sure that you're not one of those folks that end up with a smoking dishwasher. Okay, also... Yeah, Gigi. So you have anything to add to that, Gigi's Boo?
No,
Okay.
You can't recall me. I'm the dishwasher, but I'm not on recall.
That's right, Boo Boo Bear. That's right. Okay, here we go again. As we've talked about many times in the past, that you're being poisoned from a variety of sources and directions. And of course, all this is just coincidental. AltHealthWorks.com releases an article that says cancer-linked Monsanto chemical found in 5 major orange juice brands. October 24th, so it's a recent article. And we're looking at, and of course, they go through all the hoorah about how much orange juice is consumed in the country and that fact that it's good for you. And yeah, I think everyone here who listens to this show at least knows that. However, a grassroots nonprofit called Moms Across America has made a remarkable impact on the world of food activism, helping to expose the Monsanto company's link to the American Pediatrics Association. How many people knew there was a link between Monsanto and the Pediatrics Association? Huh?
I didn't know it.
I didn't either. So that's covered here in the story, and there's a hyperlink to take you to another site to talk about that. And but of course, since that was revealed, they gave Monsanto the boot. Well, of course, well, yeah, egg in their face. What are you gonna do? Recently, the organization made waves with an announcement that caught the attention of orange juice drinkers. And we're talking about glyphosate. Glyphosate is here, glyphosate is there. It's gone variously since we started talking about this thing. It's gone from a non-persistent item to a very persistent item. It reminds me of the old tobacco science. That, just over time, everything just morphs and changes very gradually, so the average person really doesn't notice. Let's see. Glyphosate is considered a probable human carcinogen. Okay, and that was some research that was done in March 2015. And in these tests of the orange juice, that had amounts ranging from 4.43 parts per billion to 26.05 parts per billion. And here, here's the bottom line, if you will. The 5 major brands. Tropicana. It's like, that's probably the major brand, with amounts of 26.05 parts per billion of glyphosate residue. And the 2 samples that were tested were both purchased from Target stores. Not that I think that makes a big difference. Then you have Minute Maid, 13.54, from Jack in the Box. Stater Brothers, and I'm not familiar with that one, but 4.93, purchased at the stores of the same name, so it's apparently a in-house labeling. Signature Farms, with amounts of 6.33, purchased at Vaughn store, and Kirkland with amounts of 5.96 purchased at Costco. So what's all this mean? There are organic alternatives, and that's something you can always look at, although I'm not totally convinced that that's going to make a huge difference. I think those need to be, I think you have to be very careful with that as well, because of just this stuff is everywhere. Glyphosate is everywhere. As it turns out, Simply Orange from Coca-Cola and Tropicana both have been sued over these chemically enhanced flavor packs. Okay, it's yet another reason why health-conscious consumers should think twice before buying these flavor pack things. Let me see exactly what that is. That's class action suit against Tropicana. The customers originally filed the complaint back in 2011, stating that Tropicana advertisements and labeling failed to disclose that its Tropicana Pure Premium Orange Juice is scientifically designed and modified with artificial flavoring and aroma. It says they use chemically engineered flavor packs that are derived from sources other than those to make the juice, including oils from peels of oranges imported from Mexico, Brazil, and other foreign countries. I think we'll save that and also put that in the blogcaster, Gigi's Boo. I'd not heard of that class action lawsuit. Have you?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, we're going to. We'll share that out with everyone. Let me see. There's a couple links. Let me go ahead and drop this link in the chat room for those who have an interest. And yeah, if you're not in the chat room and you're not getting these links real time, and if you had a question or a comment to make about it, you just have to wait until it comes out in the blogcaster. So, sorry about that. Yeah, and there's this another article here talks about the flavor packets. I've just not heard of those, quite frankly.
I have.
Have you really?
Well, there are little packets that you can buy, single packets, and put them in your water and shake it up. I think so, Gary. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, this kind of suggests that it's also put into the orange juice itself, or what they call
Oh,
them, or what
okay.
they.
I'm sorry. I
No,
hadn't heard of
don't
that.
be sorry, because I think you're right about that, because you can put it in water. But I think it suggests that they also stick it in the juice product itself. So, wow. So you're really not getting orange juice when you think you're getting orange juice. Oh, interesting. And since it's just been Halloween, I guess we have to throw this out there as well. Be careful about black licorice, apparently. If you're one who likes black licorice, I never was personally. However, if you can actually eat too much of it, as of course you can with anything. But FDA issued a warning highlighting the dangers of black licorice. Those 40 or older who eat 2 ounces of black licorice a day for at least 2 weeks, whew, I don't know if I could do that, can lead to an irregular heart rhythm or an arrhythmia. And it goes on to say why. It contains a chemical that causes potassium levels in the body to fall. What it doesn't go into is that a naturally occurring chemical, or is it an additive? Let's see what it says. Let's look at the old nasty Wikipedia. So this chemical, which has a relatively unpronounceable name, glycerin, which sounds made up, it doesn't sound natural, is the chief sweet-tasting constituent of licorice root. Okay, so maybe it is natural. Structurally, it is a saponin that has been used as an emulsifier and gel-forming agent in foodstuff and cosmetics. It has been used as a prodrug for a compound. For example, it is used in Japan to prevent liver carcinogenesis in patients with chronic hepatitis C. Whew, okay, whatever. Anyway, that's the fact that apparently it leaches potassium from the system, and your potassium level will return to normal when you stop eating it. So that's good to know, right, GD's Boo?
That's right.
I'm trying to catch something in the chat room here. The sound off now with folks talking in background. What folks are talking in the background, GD's Boo?
There's nobody talking here.
Is Atticus talking again?
No.
I told him. Okay. And this is an older article, but yet again, it's something that we need to, it's about glyphosate, yet again, it's something that we need to emphasize, and something we believed independently for a long time, that this whole business about gluten intolerance is actually glyphosate poisoning. And this comes from a blog called Granny's Good Food, and talks about the fact that, of course, gluten has been in wheat since it was first grown, and there have always been people who have some level of problems digesting wheat or grains with gluten. But apparently today, about 50% of the world has a problem with gluten, and that number is based on a pediatrician in New Zealand, author of the gluten syndrome, says he believes the percentage of people who are gluten sensitive could be between 30 and 50%, and that comes from a website called Celiac Disease. So what? And I don't get it. Glyphosate has only been on this planet since it was patented in 1973. Okay, and this herbicide goes by about 32 trade names, different ones. Since the patent expired in 2000, it's made now by 9 chemical companies, most of whom are also in the drug business. Not coincidentally, I'm sure. Over 200 million pounds of it is used all over the world every day. That's 100,000 tons. I'm sorry, every year. That's 100,000 tons. Roundup brings in half of Monsanto's yearly profits. And just like vaccines, the manufacturers add their own extra ingredients called adjuvants or surfactants. Some data suggests that the adjuvants are even more toxic than the glyphosate, and that's also referred to by another study. So anyway, I'm not going to read all of this, but it's just, it's kind of get on the soapbox when you start talking about glyphosate, because that's a major issue, and I think over in the future it's going to be discovered to have been one of the most significant health issues that mankind has ever faced. That's going way out on a limb, maybe, but you start talking about Agent Orange, right? And how many years was it until someone finally admitted that Agent Orange was a big problem in Vietnam? What about that, Gigi's Boo?
I know it. Yeah, they did. Mother has a good friend whose husband died from Agent Orange. So, sad situation.
Yeah, and and yet again, I mean, has anybody at Monsanto paid a price for this yet?
Oh, no.
No, of course not. And to make it even worse, and I think most people here know this, that, I mean, it was originally designed to kill as a weed killer, right? And then, of course, the GMOs came along and they made Roundup resistant or glyphosate resistant seeds. So you could just spray these plants down, soak them with glyphosate, and the plants will live and everything else will die. Well, now, what do you know? They discovered that, and certainly sure it didn't have anything to do with selling more of the product. They discovered that to make harvests easier, they could soak the crop down right before harvesting with glyphosate, and it would desiccate the material or help dry it out. Wheat and cane sugar are the two foods most often treated that way. And the question comes up, what foods have wheat and sugar? Take a walk down the cereal aisle, the ones with the pretty boxes that beckon to your children. Mm-hmm. See the cookies, crackers, breads, cakes, all those things that have gluten. Well, they also have a double dose of glyphosate. How wonderful. Anyway, here's that. It's like I say, it's an older article from 2014, but apparently we've learned nothing since. For those who want to talk about celiac disease or gluten intolerance and all that stuff and how they can't eat bread and blah, 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 you might want to point this out. Well, Boo Boo Bear?
What?
You like to watch a cooking channel sometimes, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Here's a funny story. A fake celebrity chef. They have this Food Network events that are, put on across the country. But this fake celebrity chef staged a Food Network event and scammed 300 attendees.
Oh, God.
It was revealed a few years ago that the host of Food Network's Dinner Impossible, Frank Irving, had faked his resume. Now a fake celebrity chef faked, not very well actually, a non-sanctioned Food Network event titled Dinner Impossible Barbecue. Leonard Lenny Rubeck, 20, from Newcastle, Delaware, solicited nearly $10,000 at $35 per ticket from Carneys Point, New Jersey residents. Rubeck claimed the event would feature Bobby Flay, Paula Deen, Richard Ray, and Robert Irving. In publicizing the event, Rubeck wore a Food Network chef jacket and a medallion that he claimed to have won on Iron Chef. Rubeck taught cooking classes despite not having many of the basic skills required for a chef. In fact, he completed only 2 quarters of work at the culinary program of the Art Institute of Philadelphia in 2010. Residents grew suspicious about Rubeck's credentials and were able to confirm that Rubeck had no association with the network, and he has agreed to return all of the money.
That or be sued.
What is wrong with this guy? I mean, if he got the money, he actually convinced himself he could pull this off. Why didn't he just take the money and run? But no,
that's true. No, he wanted to stay around and maybe face the music.
I don't know. I guess he convinced himself that he was all that. He was actually able to.
That 15 minutes of fame.
That's right. Well, he got it right here on the road less traveled. Actually, about 2 minutes worth. And Hal's show today is up on the Blogcaster. So if you didn't watch it, or hear it rather, live, and it's rolling out in the archives. So maybe take a look for that on YouTube and Spreaker, and also reallibertymedia.com and the Blogcaster. So you can find it all there. Okay, this is one. Gigi's Boo and I weren't sure that we hadn't talked about this, but I think we talked between ourselves about it. And it's kind of a sticky question, and is fairly timely, I think, at the moment. And there are a couple of directions I'm going to go with this story, but we'll start out with this BBC article from BBC Magazine that poses the question, can we teach robots ethics? And of course, most people are aware how artificial intelligence now is being incorporated into so many different things. In fact, I believe that was mentioned earlier today about how people's what they consider personal work, and why they keep it on a cloud, I don't know. But their personal work can be blocked from going to it because it doesn't meet certain guidelines, or it violates certain terms of service, or whatever. And all that is driven now, for the most part, by artificial intelligence. Okay, that looks for terms, it looks for phrases, looks for things, the way you type, the words that you use, paragraphs and syntax and context. It looks at all of that, and if it doesn't like it, it'll block you out. And then you have to go through some crazy process to try to get it unblocked. So, anyway, Hal talked about that today. But anyway, so what about this ethical issue, Gigi's Boo? I mean, and I think we talked about this. What is really the source of ethics, Gigi's Boo?
I think ethics comes from the same place that your morals do, personally.
Okay. I think I agree with you.
That's me. You know, not many people think like me. I'm the odd one in the bunch, but
no, I think you're exactly right. It's a very subjective thing to begin with, and that requires being able to connect more than a linear set of elements. You have to go into different dimensions, and all this is learned. I mean, where do you get these morals from, Gigi's Boo?
Well, you used to get them from society, because society as a whole was ethical and moral. I think it comes a lot from your upbringing, although people get away from their upbringing and what they're taught and might do some things their parents didn't like, but they usually come back to it. And I know this sounds really, really probably weird to people, but I think you get them from your soul. I think a person's soul, or spirit, or heart, or whatever you want to call it, you are born with it. See, we get in a great debate about this. We've talked about this before. You have people who are morally good, and then you have people who are not. And you and I have really talked about that. I think a lot of it has to do with upbringing, and a lot of it has to do with genetics and body makeup. My 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I think I agree completely. And I think one big word that came to my mind while you're doing such a good job describing that is a word known as sentience. Is ethics unique to a sentient being? And that kind of goes along with the whole idea of a consciousness of a soul, as you said, soul or spirit, self-awareness, which is that's where things start to get a little scary about AI. But and we've seen movies, series made about that kind of thing. But to me, there is no genetics in a robot. So environmentally whatever ethics they might possibly acquire would be from our environmental influences.
Yeah, yeah.
So that brings up the question of who exactly are they learning their ethics from environmentally? Because that goes back to programming again. I mean, garbage in, garbage out, right? So
Yeah.
are we to be made to believe that but just because something is considered artificially intelligent, that it can exceed the sum of its own programming? And that is perhaps another way of phrasing the question. What were your thoughts, Chichi?
Well, I don't have too much on that, so much as I think anything can be programmed to do anything. We know that for a fact. It depends on who gets a hold of it, whether it's a robot or a human. We've talked about that in great length. Well, let me go back just a little bit and tell you about my nursing career. I worked a lot in two areas. One was psychiatric nursing, and the other was with heart patients. And I ran my own little study with people who had open heart surgery. We would find that some of them who were absolutely complete, no other way to put it, assholes, when they woke up from surgery, they were totally different, and vice versa. One man never ever drank coffee in his life, and when he woke up, he craved coffee. Personality changes, emotional imbalances come along with that heart surgery. I've often said that maybe the spirit, the inner man, innermost workings of your mind, your soul, whatever you want to call it, higher power, is located in the heart, because too much changes when people have heart surgery. The only person I never saw really, really change a lot was a minister. And he was still as good a man as he ever was, but he was a little bit more short-tempered. So you go back, and the robot has no heart. He's like the Scarecrow on the Wizard of Oz. Didn't have a heart, but the Scarecrow could feel. He had emotion. And that was make-believe. We're not make-believing with these robots. They're being put to use. And they're being used for various things. Robotic hands that look real now, that actually flex, can pick up, can do all kinds of things. I think we're drawing a fine line here. And I'm not so sure I like it. Don't know, I have mixed feelings on that. I know I got off a little bit, so take it back to where you had it. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I was listening to you, and Grimner made some interesting observations as well in the chat room. If it's real artificial intelligence, it means it can learn from its own experiences and therefore is designed to adapt and exceed its own original programming. Yeah, that much I go with. But when you compare or contrast it with what we consider to be normal ethics or human ethics, those go beyond our individual experiences. That's part of a social network type of thing. Now, this kind of leads to another scary thought, that as robots become more widespread or more out there, will they be able to interact with one another and develop ethical behaviors much like human beings do?
Possible. Very possible. I know this is off the beat, but
No, go ahead.
what comes to my mind is the Planet of the Apes and the sequels to it. You know, the apes took over. They were the lesser race. Robots are right now a lesser race, but I don't know. I just got mixed feelings about all that.
Yeah, it's certainly thought provoking, and that's really, I guess, where we want to go with this is encourage people to look at it, and because it's, like it or not, here it comes, and there's actually more to it than just this, and it kind of goes into a thought experiment, if you will, that I was having. And it's a little bit spooky, too, because, and here's why. There are a couple of things that are big in the news. Of course, artificial intelligence is one, and quantum computing is the other. But how often, if ever, do you hear people talk about both of those things in the same context? I hear them talk about those things separately, but what happens when you integrate that? What happens? Well, we already know, I mean, if you've looked at quantum computing at all, we already know that quantum computing works by interacting with parallel universes or time dimensions or whatever. They're not exactly sure how that works, but they do know that somehow it interacts cross-dimensionally. Okay, now let's examine that a little bit and say what exactly or who exactly also exists across that dimension. You follow my line of thought here. So if you integrate artificial intelligence with quantum computing, is it not possible, that you're removing a veil and allowing an interaction from a different dimension through an artificially intelligent robot or being? You following that, Gigi?
Yep, I'm following it.
What do you think about that?
I think that it's possible, and I think it will happen.
Well, I think there have been warnings about that sort of thing, haven't there? And maybe metaphorically or in other contexts, hasn't a warning been always out there about that sort of thing?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, it's kind of spooky, and if for no other reason, it gave me a storyline for another book idea. So I'll go ahead and say that much. But it is kind of concerning when you think about it in that way. And if you really look at the people who push quantum computing, I mean, and that's Google and that's Lockheed Martin, to name two specific ones that work together on this. That's, if you follow that line, it could sound, it's maybe a little science fiction-y, but if you follow that line of thought, then you actually can be importing ethics from another timeline, and those ethics might not match up with ours. Anyway, that's kind of my wild thought experiment that was associated with that. No warranties implied or actual or implied. All right, Gigi's Boo, any other thoughts on that kind of thing?
No, that's stippling a little bit out of my league.
Well, I don't know. I don't think it is. I think there's an overlap here that we start getting into the spiritual aspects of all this.
Oh yeah.
I think there's some overlap, and it's a little bit spooky how overlapped it seems. So at any rate, how about this? Here in this part of the world, of course, there are always issues about pipelines and right-of-ways and all this good stuff. Of course, this area is no different. In this part of the world, there's something called the Mountain Valley Pipeline that, as much as they try not to tell you, the whole point of the Mountain Valley Pipeline is to move product to the East Coast, to the Hampton Roads area, where it can be shipped out of the country. Okay, so now you start getting into the topics of eminent domain and all that stuff, and that's hot and heavy here in this part of the world right now. Landowners are refusing, surveyors coming on, they're trying to come on their property, and the courts are issuing injunctions against the property owners to force them to allow the surveys. It's a big ugly mess, and something Hal talks about on his show, not that directly, but to other circumstances, very similar people similarly situated, I guess you'd say. But as it turns out, here in West Virginia, and Gigi's Boo and I were talking about this earlier as it related to other events in the past in West Virginia, the West Virginia Water Quality Agency has waived their certification requirements for the Mountain Valley Pipeline. On Wednesday, the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection announced the state has waived the requirements that the controversial pipeline project obtain a Clean Water Act 401 water quality certification in West Virginia. And, of course, the people against this whole thing have gotten up in arms about it, after assuring a federal court that it was committed to reconsidering whether the Mountain Valley Pipeline would degrade the hundreds of streams it would impact. The Environmental Protection Agency threw up its hands and admitted that it is not up to the task of protecting West Virginia's environment. And that was a statement from a senior attorney with Appalachian Mountain Advocates. So you see, this battle is underway. And the Clean Water Act, as Hal will tell you, this is there to allow you to pollute the water a little bit. And as long as you report your pollution, you don't have a problem with the Clean Water Act. It's when you don't report it, it's when you have the problem. So this battle goes on. And it's also another issue here in this part of the world is uranium mining. A Canadian company, and of course that's uranium business is hot in the news right now for other reasons. But it's going on here. It's kind of gone quiet here recently because there's so many people are rejecting the whole concept of uranium mining because of the tailings and all that stuff, and some of the bad experiences that have been had in other places. So that's another hot item that's going on around here. So these things operate in the background, and because then you have the glyphosate. Now, what in the world, Gigi's Boo? What is this? What's going on with all this?
Who knows, Gary? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back in a way. West Virginia kind of had a dubious history in as far as its treatment of coal miners and coal operators. The fact that West Virginia was pretty much paid for by the coal mining companies out of New York and places like that. The big money out of New York that financed so much of it. And of course that turned into the big labor. That's when the labor union movement, the United Mine Workers and all that really came about. Was as a result of these sorts of things. West Virginia was actually they had a battle. They had open warfare in the mountains of West Virginia over all this. And if you have an interest in that, just look up Blair Mountain and on YouTube, and you'll find a documentary or two that talks about this. And it's just interesting how it pits the private property ownership. Then you have labor unions, but the point of it is, at least it seems as it turned out, that everybody was a little bit wrong in all that. Of course, the operators were buying up property in any manner they could, and they'd buy up the local sheriff's department or whatever and ensure that their interests were protected over anyone else's. And so there was undue influence that way. The miners who knew very little else to do, and they were paid very, very small amount of money. Of course, they had company stores and they had company housing. And the thing of it is, the mining companies bought up these whole areas. They bought up these mountains. It was all private property, and so they brought in the Phelps detectives that actually out of Roanoke and Bluefield, West Virginia, Roanoke, Virginia, Bluefield, West Virginia. They brought those detective agencies in, basically as what you would consider today as contractors, to keep the peace on their private property where their mines were located and where their miners lived in many cases. So it's a fascinating story of corruption and of both sides. Of course, you had the labor unions coming down, and you can't help but notice the timing between their attempts to influence the private property rights and to some degree of the operators, and how it was possibly or probably tied in with the Bolshevik actions in Europe and all these sorts of things. So it's a very interesting study. Eventually it did lead to some reforms that were beneficial to the to the average miner. But it was after people died and people were assassinated, and it's quite a story. So this business with the Mountain Valley Pipeline does not surprise me at all, coming out of West Virginia. So what are your thoughts about all that? And I know you have some thoughts, GT.
Well, the Appalachian Mountains, of course, and the coal miners are very dear to my heart. They're a proud people. You know, you and I talked about, well, what else could they do? Well, those people had lived in that part of the country for centuries. Their ancestors had been there, and they weren't going to up and leave their country, their home, not their country, their home, and go somewhere else. Because you even talk to those proud coal miners today, and they're not over the war. And somebody laughed and said, what, the Civil War? No, the Revolutionary War. They move at a much slower pace, much slower pace than we ever had time to move. I don't buy that the government didn't go in and bomb. I think you said that it was the mines, the mine owners who owned the land paid for the planes to go in and drop pipe bombs and all this other stuff. I don't buy it. I think the government did it. But there again, I'm an Indian, so I have all this distrust against government to begin with. But the coal miners, I was so glad to see that the coal miners have been deregulated per se and are now back working what they know to work. They are hardworking people. They are not lazy. They don't look for a handout. And if mining stops, the greatest opioid outbreak is in what country, Gary? I mean, in what state, Gary? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head. Do you know?
I do.
Okay.
Kentucky. Because the mines had played out, the people didn't have anything else to do. Like Popcorn Sutton, if they tried to make a little liquor out of their corn, the feds come in and got them. So they dealt drugs. And in doing so, a lot of people became addicted. But that is the highest rate of opioid abuse in this country is in Kentucky. Sad, isn't it?
Yeah. And what makes it, and these are probably diversions too. You're talking about, quote, legal pharmaceuticals, end quote, being diverted to be used like Oxycodone.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So these jerks are making a profit off of this. You know, much the same way as any group like the miners were exploited. Don't get me wrong. They were exploited by the operators, which is what caused the problem to start with. And from the operator's perspective, though, they were also being exploited by the transportation companies and by the people in the major financial markets who set the prices for these things, or set the price per ton for coal. And so it's all one big ugly process. It's hard to say any one of them is totally responsible, because it's just this unfortunate dance that occurs.
Yeah.
Right, Gigi's boo?
Exactly right.
Yeah, well, let's see. Let's finish up here. We have 2 minutes. Kind of a funny story I found today. It's back from the middle of October, but I just tripped over. It's from a blog called Rare Houston. And it turns out that this gentleman in Houston purchased a Sherman tank. Okay. Tony Busby is actually an attorney, Houston attorney Tony Busby, and who already was in hot water with the homeowners association in his neighborhood. And the reason is because he had his Sherman tank parked out front on the street on a trailer, it looks like. And to the extent that he started getting parking tickets on his tank, he puts a note on the tank. It says, "Dear Officer Jones and others who are coming out to put a parking ticket on this tank every 2 days, if you're going to be in law enforcement, I suggest respectfully that you read the city codes for the definition of a large vehicle as set forth in the Houston Municipal Code." He goes on to tell them the chapter and verse on the code surrounding that. He goes on to say, "This tank landed at Normandy. It ain't hurting anyone, and you're wasting your damn time putting a silly piece of paper on it, especially one that has no legal merit. Please go fight crime or the other things that the taxpayers pay you to do. I support you wholeheartedly, even when you're being ignorant." Oh, yeah. And of course, the neighbors are complaining. It's a $600,000 World War II Sherman tank. They say it blocks the traffic on the street and causes congestion when people slow down to look at it. Now, is that the fault of the tank, or is that the fault of the people who slow down to look at it? And Busby, of course, says it's not as bad as all that. So this, he's going to move the tank. He's going to take it to his ranch on the next Sunday for hunting season. I'm not sure how that all ties into hunting season. And he also cites the fact that he had served in the Marine Corps and tells the police to call on him if they ever need anything. Anyway, that's what we need to have. Gigi's boo, we need to have.
That's right.
We need to get us a tank. We can do that. Any closing thoughts, Gigi's boo?
Just what I'll always say. Remember to take the road less traveled. And remember, I love you big to my heart.
That's right. We're happy to be here. We're happy you're here, more so. And come on back to reallibertymedia.com. Check out all the different shows. There's even a schedule you can look up on the homepage. So I guess that's it for us this week, and we'll see you next time on the road less traveled. Take care. See ya. Bye-bye.